The Monster in the Twilight. By Jorg. Chapter 29. Magic. Cutie Mark Crusaders Rescue Team. 5 energetic little ponies bounded through the shattered doors, but they promptly flattened to the ground when a blackened form wreathed in green magic flew backwards above them, flashing through the open doorway with a mingled yelp of pain and terror. Apple Bloom was the first pony to spring back up and dart across the floor to where a battered monster lay in the midst of 5 large spherical stones. Monster! What did she do to you? Despite having one eye swollen closed and a trickle of blood dripping down her face, Monster smiled at the little filly. Loyalty, she croaked, sweeping away a building tear with one dirty purple hoof. How touching, purred Nightmare Moon, moving close to the little ponies clustered around their wounded friend. Behind them, the shattered remnants of the door pulled themselves together in indigo magic and sealed the portal closed just as flawlessly as it had been before tall grass had smashed it open. If you somehow meant to make these little foals bear the elements of harmony, you must have been hopelessly insane. Quick! Scootaloo! Squealed Sweetie Belle while pointing to a symbol on one of the large smooth stones next to Monster. The book. Get the book. Right, shouted the little Pegasus filly, grabbing the elements of harmony, a reference guide and flinging it right into Nightmare Moon's face. Generosity, sighed Monster, trying not to face hoof at Scootaloo's look of shocked realization. Nightmare Moon snarled as she shook her horn, the book fluttering helplessly on it for a few moments until it burst into flaming sparks. Why, you little smile! The shadows of the dark room turned to day, particularly in the area just a few inches in front of Nightmare Moon's face, where the highest intensity setting of Featherweight's camera flash was used to capture the smallest details of her shocked expression. Erg! Nightmare Moon stumbled away, firing a bolt of magic at random that reflected off the floor, wall, and ceiling, before striking her in the flank. Laughter, snickered Monster while the rest of the little ponies laughed. We aren't afraid of you, Nightmare Moon, declared Sweetie Belle, standing in front of Monster with her head held high. Well, not a lot. Maybe just a little. Where is your fear? Snarled Nightmare Moon, stalking closer. Why do you not fear me? We ride in Scootaloo's wagon. It takes a lot to scare us. Honesty, said Monster, struggling to get up on her hooves. Twist looked at her bloody hind leg and gasped. Thop at you too. These hurt. Let me get my bandagette. Kindness, said Monster with an affectionate nuzzle for the little filly, who had started crying. Nightmare Moon stumbled back, her eyes wide with fear as her voice rose into a terrified screech. No. This cannot be. You don't have the last element. You're just a mindless beast from the forest. The dark alicorn looked frantically around the room as a low hum began to grow around the stones, suddenly turning to the scarred unicorn and lowering her horn. Die! A blast of ebon power burst from Nightmare Moon's horn and swept over the 6 friends, but it burst into scintillating fragments when a sphere of deepest purple surrounded them. 5 little popping noises sounded as the stone spheres ruptured, and brilliant motes of dust began to circle the little ponies. Despite her bloody leg, Monster stood proudly in the middle of the swirling stone fragments, her eyes white with power and her horn glowing as bright as the sun. Nightmare Moon stumbled backwards, trying to shade her eyes as the scarred unicorn spoke. My name, she said, lifting her head and horn proudly while rainbow light filled the room, is Twilight Sparkle. And you will not harm my friends. An explosion of indigo and green fire propelled the screaming changeling out of the shattered doorway, his flailing limbs wreathed in green fire as he bounced along the rubble that filled the courtyard until he came to rest inside a smoldering brush pile. Although she was lagging behind the others, Trixie hastened her gallop when the fragments of the door began to knit themselves together, and ducked when Rainbow Dash zipped out in front above her. By the time the Pegasus had reached the doorway, the doors had twisted back into shape just as solidly as before if the noise Rainbow Dash made when she bounced off them was any indication. When Trixie galloped past the smoke that marked the changeling's resting point, she spared the time to give him a quick glance, and felt oddly relieved that he was alive and struggling against the thorny branches. It would have taken valuable breath she could not spare to gasp out a quick, "Thank you," but she grabbed him out of the thorns with her magic anyway to give him a boost. It still slowed her down more, to the point she was the last one to the steps while Rainbow Dash beat futilely against the rebuilt doors. "Stupid doors," gasped Trixie, heaving for breath at the bottom of the stairs while the rest of the group milled around. "Stand back!" She lowered her horn and fired a blast at the massive doors, a weak popping noise no louder than a firecracker. "That won't get us nowhere," shouted Applejack, turning around to buck viciously at the closed doors, joined by Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash. "I have skill, not power," snapped Trixie. "Then save my flower," snapped back Zecora, looking a much paler pink while she gasped for air by her side. "Stop it, you two," shouted Applejack, hammering her hind hooves into the door again and again with no results. "If that thing feeds on hatred and bickering, the two of you'll..." Light flooded out to fill the world in hues and shades that no mortal light should ever be forced to take. Filtering out of the tall windows and through the cracks in the door, it illuminated the ponies in vibrant detail. Every shade of their coats flared into brilliant color, the cloudy sky above lit with brief chromatic glory as the clouds were blasted away, the ruins blazing with power and light. And the pink-alicorn illusion around Zecora began to dwindle and fade. "No, don't go," screamed the zebra in pure panic as she scrabbled her hooves against the door, only to collapse in tears when the rest of the pink vanished from her body. The suddenly plain-looking zebra remained slumped by the doors, with her tears pouring onto the dusty ground. "What is it?" asked Trixie in a panic, dashing up next to her and shoving at the stubborn door. "My daughter draws her last bits of power, in this, her final hour. *******. The world was light and power and pain. Twilight Sparkle was frozen in agony, unable to breathe, unable to scream. Power pounded in on her fragile body from all around, even as the light descended from the ceiling. Agony tore through every nerve as scar tissue hissed and boiled, burned out neurons rejoined, cells long dead sprang back to life. Too fast. Obedient to her will, the world slowed. Her hammering heartbeat turned into a constant sledgehammer of pain, screams of panic from her friends dopplering into low rumbles, the 5 streams of power converging into her being burning beyond anything she had experienced before. Power filled her heart, her soul, every single cell in her body and still more poured in. The light twisted in her powerful grasp, settling down, getting closer and closer with each moment. Slower. Time staggered, stuttering and skipping in excruciating bursts until she focused her mind. The smashing impact of her heart slowed even more until each beat was a slow surge, a gentle wave of pain. Light still drew near, but the power rushed into it like lightning into a tall tree. She was a conduit, a moist circuit of delicate flesh and blood between the stroke of lightning and the earth. The power flowed in and through and out into the light without touching her flesh. It was pleasure greater than any she had ever experienced, even when she had been driven by her frail flesh to seek companionship. Even the power she experienced when she touched the sun paled against this. With this much power, she could make suns. Nightmare Moon appeared only as a blur to her perceptions, a dark knot of magic tied around frail threads, so few as to be nearly non-existent. With the power she had now, it would only take a thought, a mere twitch of the mind to tear that evil into pieces so small even it would be unable to reform, but at a loss of the trapped soul. "Bring back my sister, Twilight Sparkle. I know you can." The memory made pain rack her body again, drawing up the hatred and fear she had buried and causing the world to flicker and fade. Something was wrong, something she could not see in the glare of the light. Her innermost instincts screamed against the idea that the approaching light showed, that it expected, that it demanded. The power could be used to cleanse the soul of nightmare, but it would take every bit of power she could draw. The 5 smaller sources of power sensed their need and grew, bringing the light to a blinding brilliance that she fought. It was wrong. It was wrong. Then the light touched her head, and she understood. There was no power in the elements of harmony. They drew their power from their users. 5 little ponies, her friends, twisted in pain while their elements drew power from deep within their souls. They were too small to power the elements, too young, too weak. Luna could be cleansed of her taint and saved, but only at the cost of 5 precious lives. No. She fought with the light, struggling against it as the power grew. It fought back, wanting to only be used, not caring what the costs would become. Power expected sacrifice. It existed only to be used, and it drew more power from her friends every timeless instant she struggled. Soon it would be too late. Her friends would die. Kill me, Twilight Sparkle. Save thy friends. No. The spell-fed knot of power in the alicorn twisted in her vision, feeding on the hatred and fears inside its host body. It was created from hatred and anger incarnate, living on the dark emotions and wanting only destruction. The light clung tightly to her head now, pressing down as if to say it would not yield until this fragment of disharmony was gone, even if it meant the death of her friends. She could feel the first faltering of energy from her friends, a green twitch in the network of power that engulfed her in agonizing potential. There was no time left. Twilight Sparkle faced the light, drawing on her every fragment of will. The roar of power from the other elements stopped, then ran backwards when she poured power back into their faltering bodies. With a tiny flicker of movement, her body appeared next to the nightmare. She shoved the unconscious bodies of her friends backwards to be out of danger, and the threads of power from the other elements were severed. The light guttered when it ceased to draw power from the little ponies, leaving far too little power to destroy the nightmare in her host body. Twilight did not care. She had made a different choice. Power flared again in the light, driven by Twilight when she poured her own magic into the ancient device. Rage and fear powered the sphere of energy that snapped into existence around the two combatants, silver and invulnerable as the panicked nightmare rapidly found out. She flung herself against the inner surface of their prison while Twilight glowed like the sun, forming a second smaller sphere in the center. Slowly and steadily, the center sphere grew in size and brilliance while pulling at the forms of the two trapped ponies. "No!" screamed Nightmare Moon. "What are you doing? She is creating a place where hatred and fear cannot exist. You will die with us," snarled the Dark Alicorn, unleashing a blast of power against Twilight that curved even as she fired and vanished into the growing center sphere without a sound. "She knows." With a wordless growl, the Dark Alicorn lunged at Twilight before being caught in the same powerful grip. Although she struggled against its power, the portions of her body closest to the center faded and streamed away as they fell, carrying any last word with them until nothing was left. The center sphere continued to expand in an inexorable fashion, soon to be as large as the outer sphere, even while Twilight began to fade also. All of her anger had long since been poured into the light crowning her head, as had every scrap of fear and shame, and worry. Now as the last bits of her soul streamed into the light, her memories of home and the terrible falling sun in the sky vanished first, then her friends, and finally the memories of a black and white striped mare pulling her burned body out from under a bush. "Goodbye, Mom." As the last bits of her mind flowed through the element of magic, Twilight could only see the light. And it was good. *******. When the adult ponies broke into the room, there was no sign of Nightmare Moon or monster, just 5 unconscious children around a golden diadem that sat alone on the floor. And a huge ball of incandescent light suspended motionless in the middle of the room. Shrinking. Author's note. There was fanart for this chapter, from Dessert 7-Eleven at DeviantArt, but it seems to be gone now. If anybody wants to make a replacement, I would be more than happy to link to it. End author's note.